Hi everyone, and welcome back to Left of the Dial, taking you through the classic age of vinyl and beyond. And I do mean welcome back. Today, I wanted to ask something, just a quick question that I've been thinking about quite a lot lately, and that is, whatever happened to putting typeface on album covers? Seriously, have you guys ever noticed this? Because there are a lot of new albums that are going completely textless nowadays. This has been a steadily growing trend in album art, mostly over the last couple of years, but it has really reached a new zenith point in the year of our Lord 2020. Like, here are just a few of my favorite albums to come out in 2020, but take a close look as to what they all have in common. You see it yet? Not a single one of these releases has any typeface on it. None whatsoever. It doesn't have the album title, not the band, not even the record label. Nothing. Nothing. That clip never gets old as per 2009, but it's true though. And I'm all for big changes in the music industry status quo, but seriously, this is popping up everywhere now. Come on, dog, you too? The 2020 albums that actually have text on them are getting so limited that they could practically be counted on just the one hand. And most reliably, they're coming from veteran act musicians. This was already happening a lot in 2018 and 2019 even, with plenty high-profile releases having no album title or artist name on the front. Sometimes the albums had no name. On others, they simply have nothing. At times, I almost find myself at a complete loss of words over this total loss of words. I was in trouble like 3 words into that sentence. You could call me out for cherry-picking albums that fit the example I set up, and that might be true to an extent, but still though, come on! This is a lot of albums to cherry-pick from. Look at this list, it's still going! All different genres and methods of release, too. Give it a couple more years and we can almost call typeface a dying art. Are musicians just running out of letters to use or something? Okay, just put the words onto the board, Dan. If you want to build a sentence, then stop standing there. You need to do something. The category is album titles. This is not that hard. Give Vanna a letter, any letter, it's her job, it's what she's good at. She'll spin the tourney thing and we'll all be so much happier. Stop clapping, you're encouraging him. Do they need someone to buy them a vowel? I'll spot you the vowel, guys, really, it's no big deal. It can even be a pay it forward thing for all I care, but please just build the f***ing word already, Daryl. Why is this happening? So, what's up here? What is with this album art change? Why would a band or artist leave their album covers without any typing on it whatsoever? Has the act of releasing your album without any typeface on it become an industry-wide oversight? Or could there be something more, let's say, tactical in play here? Well, if you've scanned the length of this video, then you probably already know that I've taken some time to think it over, and I can confidently say that there are some valid and very interesting reasons why artists might want to pursue this new way of presenting their album art.
Trust me on this one, guys, you don't know how deep this conspiracy goes.
Okay, maybe you do, but I get to tell some really cool stories about some killer album covers along the way, so I'd stick around. So, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, it's a little column A and a little bit column B. Both sides will get to make their argument. Good times will be had by all. Very least, this no-text art can be kind of a welcomed variant to the standard formula of cover art as it's been. In recent years, some artists can get so complacent with their name alone being the selling point of the album that the covers start resembling that of a business card more so than a preview into their artistic expression. So maybe it's about time to do the whole no text thing. After all, there are also the album covers that declare themselves as works of art upon arrival. The kind of artwork that the creators clearly wanted to be unobstructed without anything as unimportant as a pesky band name getting in the way. It's the idea that the art is too picture perfect to alter. Is it a forcefully simplistic design that gets more power from less? Then yeah, you might want it to be fully wordless. Focus us in on a striking image, something that does all the talking for itself. These are the kinds of designs that could be noticeable from a mile away. That way, you can design it entirely out of pixels in the new Animal Crossing game. It's like the Mona Lisa in that way. Sometimes, albums might get the Textless treatment on their re-releases, and those modified designs might be the ones that stick for good. Today, I want to facilitate a discussion, and more so an appreciation for the ever-changing world of album art. Because if there was anything to say about the style of album covers, they certainly wouldn't be saying it for themselves. At least I'm laughing. Let's jump in. Okay, so it should be acknowledged at this point that this information doesn't necessarily go completely missing on the physical copies. They'll most likely print the title on the spine as concession, or maybe save it for the liner notes. But for this modern age in which we live in, the portion of the album you are most likely to see usually has no writing on it. Zilch. Nada. Okay, and right out of the box off of the bat, let it be stated that it can be difficult for laymen like myself to identify how involved the actual musicians will be with the art selection process. But for our purposes today, I will generally assume that the final versions of the albums released had significant input from the artists in question. Especially from some of the newer, more independent artists who tend to work with less studio oversight. And to be even more crystal Pepsi clear here, I am talking albums where there is no text on it whatsoever. Album covers where you cannot read the band name are not what this discussion is about, so get it through your thick skull cranium early on that I am not talking about any of those bodacious death metal fonts. Let's get that malarkey out of here right now, Jack. Except for you. You can stay. And while I'm at it, this video is not going to be a comprehensive history of typeface in album art. I'm just going to cover the subject with broad brushstrokes the way I best see fit. So please don't comment below asking why I didn't talk about whatever your favorite album is that I missed out on. Don't get mad if I didn't shine a spotlight onto Jimmy P. Daffodil's highly acclaimed under-the-radar critical darling album, Grover Cleveland's self-destructing Rainbow Apostles Band, or whatever. That's not my end goal for this video. Okay, good. Let's kick it. This trend being kicked into high throttle this year, right here, right now, might be influenced by these, shall we say, very modern circumstances we find ourselves in. To put it more specific, a considerable number of artists this year have elected to release their own quarantine album. A quarantine album, as it is an album made while artists are stuck indoors during this unprecedented global pandemic. You might have heard about it. For all the future historians out there, if you're watching this video past its sell-by date of
December 28, 2021,
then might I suggest you consult a local library for more information. Cause after all, having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. Oh wait, never mind. Artists can use the quarantine album MO to tone down any of the usual studio professionalism that's normally associated with high-profile album releases and trade it in for something of a lowered pretense instead. It's intended to be something that feels homespun and, shall we say, even relatable to the listener. How about that?
Washing hands and wearing masks, and it's not even Halloween.
And that's not even scratching the surface to all of the Zoom backyard concert streams or the wide slew of bedroom one-off singles that may or may not have stuck in radio rotation. It's too soon to tell. Because, after all, musicians are being affected by the lockdown too, of course, just like anybody is. The ones who are dependent on local gigging especially, but don't forget about the big guys up at the top either. I don't think there's a single soul alive right now who isn't feeling cooped up or getting increasingly stir-crazy these days. You see, all these jet-set hotshots working in the music biz aren't so different from you or I, and I think a valuable lesson can— Wow! That is something I totally should have expected. Take whatever I just said and completely forget about it. I know I did. The Quarantine album, trademark pending, instead aims to make a body of work that's earnest and of the times. For the people, this one, Alice! Oh yeah, that cost $5. After all, what good are entertainers if they can't entertain the working world? Do we Do we have the celebrities singing Imagine video queued up? Oh, okay, great, good. Ah yes, I look at John Lennon's grave and I notice it's turning. The fact that these records were made in pricey recording studios with an arsenal of hired musicians is mostly besides the point. It can still be a viable approach to art creation, I think.
Shaking hands is a thing of the past due to social distancing.
Heck, I seriously wouldn't be surprised if at least one album made under these intentionally limited conditions would become an eventual classic. Could you imagine Gary Wilson making this album during lockdown? Anyway, plenty of these albums are textless because it fits the small stakes narrative they set up for the record. But things have been steadily traveling this way for a while now. Why? Because the internet, of course. My best guess as to how the rise of the textless album cover ever occurred is that it's by being a byproduct, or perhaps even a progression to the music industry's now all but complete dependence to streaming services. Let's talk about it. Now, I'm not going to be the first guy on YouTube to suggest that streaming services have subverted expectations made by the justifiably skeptic and has actually ended up being a considerable boon to the album experience. That's right, albums have yet again superseded the single as the dominant method of music consumption, once more reversing the come-up of the MP3 era and the 99-cent song purchase. This intricate dance back and forth from albums to singles and back again will probably happen once more in another decade or so whenever an Elon Musk type decides to go full Dr. Doom and invent a cost-efficient musical brain penetrator that lets us listen to our favorite songs through tubes and finally popularizes scratch and sniff technology in music. Overactive imagination, I guess, but your guess is good as mine. Let me know in the comments below which albums would smell the best or smell the worst if you could sniff the cover art. It'll be a musical revolution like you've never seen before, people, echoing the same effect that talkies had on silent films. Only these will be called smellies. So now it's all about the album drop and the abundance of excitement that fans get from their favorite artists debuting all of their songs at once directly to their fingertips. Each streaming service and or your social media of choice always working in real time to make sure you know. New album by Aaron Carter, out now! Wow! With one button tap and you're right there on the album, allowing the sweet, sweet endorphins to release from that wiggly air that we call music and enter all up in your ear holes. You slippery pollywog, you. This approach has been mutually beneficial to the artists too, of course, what with album bombs becoming a unique plague of its own onto the Billboard charts. So here's my primary theory for why Typeface is rapidly turning into a relic of yesteryear. At a time when most music intake is digital, all of the information you'd really need for an album is already being displayed by the service. There isn't really a conventional purpose to the text on the album cover, not anymore at least. It can look nice and be there for aesthetic reasons and all, but it's not really necessary. You search up the artist's name and the music is always going to be there with the album name and songs neatly labeled alongside the artwork without fail. It's more important to be aware of the product's existence than anything else, not just relying on some eye-catching album art with big text on it. Back in the day, it really was vital to put all of your information on the album cover back when people needed to go to a physical store to buy your album. If someone were to look at the album cover and can't find out who the music is by, the album most likely wouldn't get purchased. So, if this simply isn't much of a necessity anymore, then why not take advantage of the space it frees up? Next up, more musicians have started taking their album artwork into their own hands, because that's also easier to do now than it ever was before. Making your own photography that's fit for mass release is one less blockade than it used to be, with Twitter and the like allowing anyone to communicate straight from their brains and to their fans with zero interference. Some musicians treat their cover art as if it's a social media photo shoot for themselves, working around with the set picture size like they'd be making an Instagram post or something. And that's what their fans are used to seeing now anyway, so it works out just fine. In the days of old, you could let musicians put their doodles onto Kmart shelves, but nowadays anybody, and I mean anybody, can take a good-ish picture of themselves and post it on their SoundCloud accounts. The influx of new album covers that look like this can be exacerbated even further by how darn tempting the do-it-yourself route can be for musicians who are working in the digital age. The lowered barricade into album art creation makes it all very doable and possible to make with virtually zero expenses. It puts all the tools necessary to get going in photography readily available in anyone's front pocket. You can make feature films on iPhones now. Of course, this is going to catch on in the music industry. The times they are becoming quite different. Which means every now and then you'll get an album cover like Yay, released in 2018, a studio album brandishing album artwork that was quite literally made entirely on Kanye West's iPhone while he was driving en route to the album's live premiere. Its creation is simple as it could ever get. He took a candid shot of the mountain ridge outside his car window, used some photo editor app to write some scribbles onto it, and well, bam! Picture perfect, cut it, print it, send it to the presses. Hang this in the Louvre. Hurry up and toss Jacques-Louis David into the incinerator, there's no time. And so, this was released unto the world as you see it, mere hours later.
This for you.
Suffice to say, this was simply unthinkable even 15 years prior. And as a quick aside, my personal ranking of the Surgical Summer Wyoming sessions are as follows. If you have any problems with it, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend you die mad about it. But let's not forget that Mr. West is no stranger to selecting minimalist or restrained artwork for his albums, sometimes. I mean, just look at the cover art to his 6th studio album, Yeezus. That's funny, right? Cause, what cover art is there? All you get on the physical copy is a clear jewel case with an oh-so-economically used dash of orange duct tape. He officially released this in major retail stores. What other artist at his stature could have commercially released a CD like this? Well, if you have to ask, then I guess you'll never know, seeing as how Yeezus is quite possibly the most musically challenging album ever released by a major artist. At least since 1982 saw the release of Bruce Springsteen's acoustic death march of an album, Nebraska. Unsurprisingly, this is an album that has never seen a vinyl release. Man, I would have loved to see how the hell they'd package that. So then what are the benefits for a band or artist to release no-text albums? Well, for some indie bands, maybe it's an act of being too cool to play by the system. Self-imposed anonymity is where it's at, they're saying. Sometimes it can be interpreted as an act of defiance when being done by a big rock band on a major label. Or, do you want some artwork that snugly complements any hazy ruinations felt by that of a great ambient album? Oh yeah, you're gonna want to leave that album cover Textless, buckaroo. And is there something to a high percentage of them being self-titled albums? I think so. A lot of the time it works when it's just the artist's face, leaving behind no doubt as to who made this music. But sometimes it can be an impressive work of art on its own, enhanced by the musician's separation from it. Maybe you want to creep your audience out. You think it should look like one of those
Cursed images.
Like, would this make for a convincing album cover? I say sure, why not? But someone should use it quickly before Death Grips gets to it first. Sometimes it's explicitly a vehicle for making a statement. Like how after an agonizing wait period by Sly and the Family Stone, There's a Riot Going On was finally released in 1971, and it was an album with less words than ever, album cover notwithstanding. The image itself captured the combative title very well, and its lack of text was accentuated by the title track's peculiar runtime of 0 minutes and 0 seconds long. Really makes you think, don't it? A black American flag with no words on it is such the evocative image that Outkast would eventually deliver a very similar message 3 whole decades later. So I hope I can make clear, I'm not trying to present Textless album covers as a brand new concept, obviously, just a growing trend to keep an eye on. There have been several groundbreaking early torchbearers to the concept from years prior. Like when post-punk ringleaders Joy Division created a t-shirt design for the ages. Or be it from tested folkies showing off their painting chops. Actually, I've got a big one. The artist formerly known as Prince made several albums using his unpronounceable love symbol while under contract to Warner Brother Records.
Mainly the media's problem with not having a pronunciation for the symbol.
If a galactic-level pop star like Prince essentially deleting his own name from existence wasn't confusing enough, he started to use this name on the same album where he informed us all that his name is Prince, and he is funky. I'm getting some mixed messages here. Oh, Prince, how do you get so funky? So, a star of his magnitude completely renouncing his name on new music must have set a precedent of some kind. But, just like virtually anything else in pop music history, we can find traces of this phenomenon stemming from the Beatles. Because of course we can. This time it's their Abbey Road album. Abbey Road is the Beatles' grandiose swan song of an album that bristles with exuberance and has the drive of a band operating at the tippy top of their game. The Abbey Road album was a grand way to usher in the 1970s, a decade they ultimately would not survive to see.
The event is so momentous that historians may one day view it as a landmark in the decline of the British Empire. The Beatles are breaking up.
But this last effort still has that 21st century air of modernity to it that their other albums don't quite get to muster up, which may be why this album has sorta earned that newer reputation of being their most consistently relevant album. If there's a modern favorite Beatles album to be had, it's probably gonna be Abbey Road. But it's more than just the music that's being exalted today. Abbey Road has become one of the most beloved album covers in music history for quite the range of reasons, beginning with a basic appreciation of the famous shot's composition. What with the standstill synchronicity of the four Beatles lined up together all while the band was in reality breaking apart. The lush, pastel-like color palette that works to emphasize the ingenious simplicity to this location. You could admire the fantastical wardrobe of what the band is wearing, and just I could go on. There's something of an accidental Renaissance feeling to it, really. This image is so famous, in fact, that there's even a 24-hour live stream of the actual Abbey Road in London that you can watch right now. So if you log on, it's pretty likely you'll get to see some slack-jawed tourists just completely ignore the traffic laws on this pretty populated street, all so they can get their glorious photo op. And the logistics of having a 24-hour surveillance on such a popular spot leads to some, shall we say, rather unfortunate sightings for the whole world to see.
Fact. Several fans have been killed trying to restage the famous photo.
Why don't we do it in the road? Why don't we do it in the road?
Celebra trecerea de pietoni Abbey Road din Londra a fost scena unui accident violent. O femeie
Oh, my aching tentacles.
And this is all without even getting into any of those belly laugh-inducing Paul is dead theories, as uncovered by the perma-stoned to boredom, self-made detectives who propagated the theory. You know what I'm talking about, right? All that jazz about how the album shoot was actually a veiled metaphor for being Paul, or fake Paul, Fall's funeral procession. Cause that license plate, when enhanced, says Paul would be 28 if he were like, well, you know, still alive, man. You just gotta see through the looking glass. No, above the looking glass. Because why is Paul holding a cig in his right hand when he's a lefty in real life? I sure hope somebody got fired for that blunder. And you gotta connect the dots on the back to find out the remaining number of Beatles that are alive. It's 3. There used to be 4, but now it's 3. And look! That's actually a hearse right there. And this man in the back witnessed the car crash that did him in. And Paul McCartney is a reptilian working for the Obama administration. And Ringo is a Freemason. Learn about all these theories and more in my newest off-Broadway play, set to open in 2021. What's Paul got to do with it? Yada yada yada. The album cover just looks cool. Why do you gotta make it weird, conspiracists? But with all of this on the cover and more, did you ever notice that there's no text anywhere on this album? It's the truth, and this was really unprecedented at the time, certainly for any musicians nearing anywhere close to their level. Their label, EMI, was dead convinced that the album just would not sell if they didn't advertise it as the Beatles, but the thing is, the Beatles are the most famous band in the world. Everybody on planet Earth would recognize them without needing to be told it's the Beatles. Like, I don't think this is a move that Supertramp could have pulled off, no offense. Compare and contrast this to the album released just before Abbey Road, the White Album. This is the inverse to the rule where there is no art. Well, in the traditional sense. You can get all postmodern on me if you want, but the only thing you are given on it is the band's name. Technically, the album was never named the White Album and is officially just the Beatles. Using absolutely nothing on the cover was a clear effort from the band to rebuff the psychedelic extravagance of Sgt. Pepper's from a year and a half before. This was going to be a different animal. And it was. Both of these album covers are praised far and wide for extremely different reasons and can lead to different conclusions on why their contrasting artwork philosophies have such lasting resonance. But if I'm heaping praise onto the Beatles, let me toss a bone to the Rolling Stones too, whose debut album doesn't have any typing on it either, aside from a Decca Records label that is. A rather gutsy lack of information that was a deliberate marketing ploy to help posture this new band as a more dangerous alternative to the Beatles, a tactic that worked quite well and helped pave a career path that they follow up to this present day. Jumping forward just some few years later, we can look at Pink Floyd's undying classic, The Dark Side of the Moon. Another album whose music of legendary proportions was welcomed to the world with an utterly iconic album cover to match. An album design that proved instantly recognizable and secured it an immovable rank in college dorms across the world, beside 40-ounce of Freedom posters and many a shirtless Jim Morrison's. Their clean, pristine, and uncluttered look Pink Floyd consistently curated for their album covers almost never featured the band being photographed, which was likely by design seeing as they were notoriously press avoidant since the removal of one-time bandleader Syd Barrett. The group felt more comfortable shrouding themselves inside their music and chose to work as studio recluses. And employing a cover artist who can create artwork so striking that it deflects attention away from the members and back towards the music was always going to be a plus. Oh, and they knew their fans would probably enjoy some Technicolor calamity to freak out about. Best fit for leaving their consciousness behind at the coat check. Check please. The Prism image as we know it was made by the world-famous album artists at Hypnosis. And it was this particular album cover that catapulted them right into the mainstream. Because the Dark Side cover is that good. But let's stop and ask if the album art would be as legendary if they went the conventional route instead and slapped the band name on there. Why would Pink Floyd do that, you might ask? I don't know, maybe they saw a Rod Stewart album being advertised on top of the Pops and it just gave them second doubts. Looking at this now, and yeah, I'm pretty sure this doesn't work. This example of textless art falls into the established category of a band letting the art speak for itself, showcasing the utmost confidence they have in the music they made. Further proof of concept to the whole text versus textless debate comes with their 1979 album, The Wall, and its reissues that heavily modify its original stark design made of empty spaces, replacing it with a more mainstream and prime-timed version of the cover that was probably commissioned by the label heads to help clue in the band's newest gaggle of fans now discovering them on the radio. Would-be fans that'd almost inevitably be turned off when the majority of songs on the album don't have the swift-footed pseudo-disco gallop of Run Like Hell or Another Brick Part 2, but is instead 80 uninterrupted minutes of Roger Waters shrieking about how the high command yeeted his daddy into a forever box. And this thing cost twice as much as a regular record. What a rip! Anyway, even though the font they chose is now rather synonymous with the band in its own right, it nevertheless just doesn't pair as well with the music. The Wall as an album is symbolic in virtually every asset. It is supposed to be expansive and impenetrable to outsiders, so throwing text on there kind of diminished the intended effect. But sometimes, for the newbie bands, you've got nothing to lose by not announcing who you are on your first album. Okay, not usually. If you have no audience at all to begin with, then intentionally omitting your band name on your debut is gonna be shooting yourself in the foot commercially speaking, but maybe you're the Velvet Underground and Nico. A record that many might be so inclined to believe has its most enduring legacy for its album artwork. Which will sound like blasphemy and an unreasonable slap in the face to fellow fans of the Velvets, cause by some very reputable accounts, this very well could be the most influential rock album ever made. But the point to be made is that this artwork still reaches far and wide, even to those who couldn't care less about whatever music it's representing. Cause beyond the music world, this is a classic work of American art. Think of just how important Andy Warhol has been to modern art, and then factor in that this is arguably the most famous work he has to his name. And the music is alright too, or whatever.
Go apple! Go orange! Go banana!
It's well instilled into the rock canon that this album bombed hard when it first released, and only built in sales in the years to come, insert Brian Eno quote here. But any of the initial recognition it did get... Can we get rid of this? We've all read this quote before. Any of the initial recognition it did get was from what little information was given on the album cover. The words to see were Andy Warhol's, tucked away in the bottom right-hand corner. This association gave validation to the band themselves. They weren't just a group of fumbling amateurs sloppily pratfalling towards garage rock. No, if Andy Warhol says they are making art, then that must have some degree of credence. It might seem trivial now, but tying this band into the New York Art Collective and Warhol's factory gave them an angle. The Warhol connection in itself is actually pretty funny because his ties to the music was tenuous at best, and that he had the audacity to tag himself as producer to the finalized album was simply laughable. But alas, it was his endorsement to the band that gave him a leg up and would provide a platform for all the musicians who'd eventually find inspiration in the album. And before we go, I must mention the eternal fright painted up on the cover of In the Court of the Crimson King, epitomizing in freeze frame the 21st century schizoid man of the record's opening song. The album cover is unforgettable from the first moment you set eyes on it. The beautiful intensity of it is the best introduction imaginable to the madcap world of King Crimson's extended discography. This record sleeve was designed by Barry Godber, a fantastically talented artist who sadly has just this sole album cover to his name before his untimely passing from a heart attack in 1970, barely a year after the album's release and at the much too young age of 24. He was given little instruction by the band for his artwork. Besides, the record needs to stand out at record shops. And it's safe to say he did just that. This is the kind of album art you can't ever forget, and it helps shape listeners' impressions of the music itself. King Crimson bandleader Robert Fripp pursued a Textless album cover to help highlight the otherness to the band. Speaking on the unusual decision to omit the band name, he clarifies, "It'll be the only record in the shop without anything down the spine on it, so they'll know which one it is." All of these classic, beloved album covers have reached their untouchable status without any text getting in the way, so it's likely that the new wave of artists have taken note. But this tactic still had room to be built upon even further with new music release strategies. This next segment is called Technology Dictates Where the Art is Going to Go. Technology dictates where the art will go. Technology dictates where the art is going to go. I feel like I could have saved some time if I announced that differently. Anywho, point is, technology dictates where the art is going to go. General aesthetics in the arts and beyond will naturally go through cycles, and expectations will change for how these aesthetics will start to be presented. Makes sense, right? Like, while I'm admittedly not the biggest fan of this new trend of all uppercase, lowercase song titling that's become quite the choice now, I'm not terribly bothered by it either. I mean, if it's your music, then you can title it however you want. Don't let me hold you back. Artists understandably want their songs to stand out when you search for them, so implementing some extreme capitalization is a mighty fine way to get your songs to jump out at people. Even if you want to do that weird Denzel Curry taboo hieroglyphics thing, then go for it. It doesn't do a lot for me, but go off, my dude. The growing presence of TikTok in the music industry has placed a much heavier prominence on making sure your songs are as searchable as possible now. Which reminds me, you can even intentionally remove apostrophes from song titles that they should be in for maximum search engine optimization. Because if you're not confident that your target audience is gonna use proper grammar when searching your song, then just make it a complete non-problem instead. I think some of these newer expectations for album art have a common thread leading back outwards to various real-world influences. Recently, more and more brands and corporations have been pointing towards some more muted looks, preferring designs with large areas of empty space and the idea of their brand's excitement being suggested rather than exaggerated and overblown. Consumers in turn have adopted a different kind of appetite for what designs will appeal to them, and it seems that brands play into these new expectations by trying to come across as more succinct than that of their competition. You know, choosing looks that give off less vibrancy or flash than past generations had been accustomed to. Maybe we can chalk this up to living in a post-Steve Jobs world where we favor effective designs, with everything being all streamlined and bullet-pointed, with sleek app designs with logos and polish and— Not you, Zune! I'm not talking about you! God, I'm sick of this! So compare this to how brands presented themselves in the early 2000s, or by God, the fever-inducing day-glow bonanzas of the 80s. Yes, this is how I cruelly remind you all that this was supposed to be the summer of George.
This was supposed to be the summer of George!
Actually, how's about we pick apart this major brand recalibration done by McDonald's as a valuable example for us?
Could be the best tasting lettuce and tomato hamburger ever!
Let's McDonald's, I love it. The fast food mogul's shift in style and brand standards went beyond just their marketing campaign and went full on into a drastic upheaval of architecture too. The once fluorescent, attention-grabbing, must-see colors of their past are gone, opting instead for a calmer Adobe look to their buildings. They rarely even wheel out their portable Beelzebub as Clown Syndicate mascot anymore, namely so they can deflect that persistent idea that their restaurant, and yes, I am calling it a restaurant for this thought exercise, is not for kids, but is instead best suited for the sophisticated adult who desires to eat salads, drink cost-efficient coffee drinks, and laugh with their mouth uncomfortably agape in photos. Live, laugh, lasagna. What do you mean they don't sell lasagna?
This is the whole reason I'm here.
This newer approach and demographics for McDonald's would have been utterly at odds with their old designs. So a more moderate look is what they settled on. And though they can still sling their Travie patties on the side, they have set example that these minimalistic design trends are not just being sought after by the showbiz kids, no, but also the big bucks business operators watching over their image with iron fist. I could imagine that some Mickey D's choose to not put their name on the building at all, knowing instead that the polished appeal of their world-famous golden arches speaks for itself and could almost, just possibly, give the illusion that their respected customers have class when choosing to go to their eatery.
This wild brawl at McDonald's?
But probably not in actual practice. The decision to make your album sans text is probably at its best when being utilized for the more atmospheric album experiences. The ones where you want to fully succumb to the music and get completely, totally lost inside of the sound waves. Like, come on, we've all had those frishin' goosebump moments with one album or another, right? This is the best case scenario, most idyllic to the nature of wordless cover art, the strange beast that it is. It allows the artist to introduce the plausibility of their listeners zoning out with the headphones on and just poring over the album art, fixed with that accelerated curiosity being brought on by the music itself. For all those times where you're willingly stuck in the music stupor that encourages you to intensely search on the album cover for those small oddities hidden in the artwork. Perhaps fixate on a peculiar brushstroke, examine the art's shadow work and wonder about what it is that casts it. Or to simply glaze over the album art in full and take it all in. This can sometimes be taken to extreme lengths as seen here, but I really do appreciate the artists who go the distance. For the decidedly less than accessible, or let's say more experimentally minded artists, sometimes this lack of text can be its own point of intrigue. Like how a bold and brash close-up of a features-heightened, almost otherworldly man with his twisted smile set against eggshell white background can't help but feel unusually out of place in the electronic section of the record shop. It gently urges you into picking it up and bringing it to the register. Or how about an unsettling mystery that can be flared off by 4 teenagers in a colorless letterboxed snapshot, all floating around in a dank quarry seemingly as just their disembodied heads. All of them are demonstrating a row of unnerving smiles that look as effortless to make as they are unconsciously tone deaf to the larger picture they're all a part of. It looks like they either know something you don't, a grim secret or premonition to come perhaps, or it's instead a permanently sedentary photo taken some moments before disaster, like one of those haunting stills you'll see blown up on the evening news. The boys feel almost trapped beside their own naivete in this photo, all but completely blind to that unshakable sense of dread that's fully apparent to anyone else looking at the cover, but the boys seem unfazed. All of this builds into a prodding curiosity that all but implores you, the listener, to discover whatever music could actually come inside the sleeve. Well, it did for me at least, and this is the story of many listeners who have heard this album through the years. In fact, I know for certain that the lack of their band name on the album cover is absolutely integral to the arc of Spiderland, because even though the band broke up immediately before the album was released, the album just kept steadily gaining recognition, new fans, and most importantly, discovery for years after its release, even though there was no longer a band to support it. Take a moment to think of how unusual a phenomenon this really is.
Clockwork, it just kept selling. Like every year, it would tick over another couple thousand. And what that kind of a pattern indicates is that everybody who got that record kind of cherished it.
The breathtaking eeriness to this music was heightened by the idea of it being made by these kids who all but disappeared after its release, seemingly without a trace. There was no name on the cover, and the band might as well not have ever existed. They were ghosts on its arrival. And so it grew into an album that was kept like an in-secret. If you were privileged enough to stumble onto this album, then it was likely to leave a sizable impact on you. Its steady rise was trailed by some incessant rumors about how the band all checked into a mental ward immediately after recording the final notes to the album and dissolving the band. And these things get taken for truth in the underground when there's not much evidence of them existing afterwards. The band eventually did reform and justifiably cash in on the movement they'd set up all that time ago, but this return to the public eye couldn't shatter the impression made by their mystery. The album built a status of near mythic proportions in alt-rock, and I'm talking pre-Nevermind alt-rock, so that's extra special. So the wordless album cover is good for the experimental gurus out there, but what about the more normal bands who actually want to, sell copies of their music? Well, wordless album covers can give off different impressions depending on which artist puts it out. Sometimes this textless method can be disarming or plainly arresting, welcoming you into the album without pretense, its chosen simplicity giving way to a perceived bon ami. We didn't even need to get a professional art team involved, they're saying. This is directly from me to you. For pop stars that are larger than life and releasing music at a career high, the lack of any text on the albums they drop can be read as a power move. It states that for this star, there's no introduction needed. You already know who they are. Adding any bulky text onto there wouldn't make the difference. This is the exact kind of rollout tactic that gives life to their Twitter superfans that makes them want to stand hard and post big posts about them on social media. This move inspires their legions of fans to want to start using words and phrases like the following. Let's talk pop music.
Let's talk pop music.
Commonly used words and expressions for music in the Twitter age. Or a study in how the internet has ruined the English vernacular. Using words like Iconic. Big mood. Cultural reset moment. Dab on the haters. Skinny legend. That's the T, sis. Great googly moogly. Wig snatched. Yowza, that's a spicy meatball. Goat season approaching. Album of the year imminent. Yellow flannel when. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. New era started. Best new music lock in. It's slit. Macaroni in a pot. Yeah, that's crisp AF. And I oop. Certifiably flop proof. Don't touch my nugs. Wubba lubba dub dub. Dude, where's my serotonin? White Claw is the law. Blueberry schnapps are on the haps. It's alright, ma, it's just mitosis. Better Nate than lever. Slat slat, my fellow slime. Flip flip flipadelphia. Pee is stored in the balls. These pretzels are making me thirsty. Gucci Poochie, based and red pills. Someone please pass me a Zima from the cooler. Doja Cat did nothing wrong. O'Reilly's Auto Parts. Where are my shrimp? Step up to me again and I'll YMCA dance on your grave. Pokemon, go to the polls. Retweet, the South will rise again. The Japanese symbol for barbecue grill. The entire Pitchfork review of Kid A by Radiohead.
You fool! You absolute cretin! You blithering and total buffoon!
The fact that so many books still name the Beatles as the greatest or most significant or most influential rock band ever only tells you how far rock music still is for becoming a serious art. Jazz critics have long recognized that the greatest jazz musicians of all times are Duke Ellington and John Coltrane, who were not the most famous or richest or bestsellers of their times, let alone of all time. I don't want to waste my time, become another casualty of society. I saw the face of God and it was weeping. I am a walking relic of reality's impermanence.
Death is real. Someone's there and then they're not.
Consciousness is humanity's shared illusion, and time will only be a flat circle. And no cap, fam. I swear, I really used to listen to Guns N' Roses, you know?
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Biatch! Okay, so maybe this next point I'm about to make here is a tad presumptuous on my part, but one could almost even be suspicious over the pop music heavy hitters who perhaps might not have been confident enough to pursue the fully textless album cover. For instance, like how unlike the other pop megastars, some contemporaneous to her and others more recent, Katy Perry and her teeter-tottering career as of late frankly can't afford not to smack her name in big letters on her new album's cover. She needs to still remind the music-buying public that she's name-brand pop, not just the cheapo store-brand space filler that's taking up room in the clearance rack. No sirree, no. At a time where the true pop ringleaders can operate on brand recognition alone, a promotion detail this simple can all the same give off pangs of mild desperation. Which is rather ironic, since her career-making blockbuster of an album 10 years earlier was wordless on its cover. But whatever primary sense was absent on its front was more than made up for in the packaging, since the CD booklet it came with actually smelled like cotton candy.
When you open the record, hopefully you'll get a big whiff of cotton candy in your face.
They wanted to put a cotton candy scent on a regular CD booklet. We had never done that here before.
Okay, Katy Perry can fire her A&R team and hire me instead, because I just found out the real reason her singles have been charting lower and lower and lower. Good God, woman. It's because she should have made this new album smell like cookie dough. Yeah, that's it. Make it smell more like Hostess sweets and less like desperation.
So I don't know if I grew up eating paint chips or what, but it was very tasty.
maybe I wasn't kidding about scratch and sniff being the future of music consumption after all. Bon appetit, my fellow slime. Ah! At least up-and-comer to the game, Ava Max has legitimate excuse for plastering her name onto her 2020 debut album. And you know what? I honestly hope she makes a good impression with this album and sticks the landing into the pop market. In fact, I heard that her album just got released a couple weeks ago, so how's about we all check out whatever artwork Ava Max decided on for her brand new... What? How? Oh my god! Who decided on this one? Why does it look this way? I'm not alone in thinking this, am I? Fellas, how are we feeling on this new album cover?
Are you all alright? Yeah. No, you are all left.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's be nice here. Let's be nice here, and just hope that Ava celebrating her brand new album's release with her fans on Roblox is gonna be the shot in the arm she needs.
Devil? Angel? It doesn't matter on this dance floor.
Here's looking at you, kid. But alas, it still must be stated that Typeface is a tool more necessary than not, and a feature that may even be crucial some of the time. Cause there have been those times where I'll hear music I'd want to check out, but it's on a nameless album cover. Or say a buddy of mine will play some really great music with the physical CD left in iShot, and I'm still left clueless as to what it is or where to find it. In my books, that's a no bueno. Like for example, I'd seen Arca's Mutant album get touted around with some really strong enthusiasm in those hip electronic circles, but I've seen this album cover for some odd years before I ever heard anybody finally mention her album by name. Okay, so this was that Arca I've been hearing so much about, but how else would I have known? Cause unless you'd want to embark on a really embarrassing Google search spree for it, you'd otherwise be left in the dark. And in an even more practical sense, some album covers without Typeface on it looks plain generic, or even too similar to other albums to even distinguish itself. Whoa. You feel that? I feel an example coming on, you feel that too? Let's go! Wait, maybe it's not an example. False alarm. It might just be my heel spurs acting up again. I'll tell you, heel spurs are just the worst. Cause they've been dragging everywhere when I walk around and busting up my shoes. It ruins all upholstery in my house actually, so... No, it's definitely an example this time, my bad. Here we go. The album cover to John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band is seminal, but perhaps not as instantly recognizable as you might think it is. Because it's quite easy to overlook the proper title to the album and the concept that it suggests, officially being released as John Lennon Plastic Ono Band. But the Plastic Ono Band in question was a crucial component to Lennon's post-Beatles work. In John's mind, him being able to cycle between interchangeable band members is what gave his new band its plasticity and could thus be a viable way for him to supplant the formerly fixed roster of band members that the Beatles had operated under. Seeing as how it was this very band structure that had Lennon feeling trapped and wanting to break away, this new method makes sense. John Lennon Plastic Ono Band was the result, giving Lennon more leeway to explore his back-to-basics leanings that fueled his White Album contributions, pursuing a first-thought, best-thought mentality to his new music. The backing band was not the focus. The members could change from album to album depending on John's whim at the time. Not a bad idea. Paul would do essentially the same thing with Wings, and Ringo's all-star band was a revolving door of anybody who's down to play second fiddle to a former Beatle. The Plastic Ono Band concept falls secondary to the songs John presents on this first album. But the intention was to solidify the concept of an anti-band, exemplified by Yoko Ono releasing her own Plastic Ono Band the exact same day as John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band. Yoko's Plastic Ono Band had a completely different set of music, different collaborators, it was just a solo Yoko Ono album, and one of her very best, mind you. But the album title, and more interestingly, the album cover, was virtually identical to the more well-known iteration by John. There was no text telling you who it is, just a naked image of the couple resting on one another at a faraway tree. The key detail? John's album had him resting on Yoko's lap, where Yoko's had her cozied up against John's chest. The pair are so far away from the camera's eye that it's almost impossible to tell the difference if you aren't specifically looking for it. So maybe slapping a title onto there could have made a noticeable difference, eh? I've always wanted to meet somebody who saw Plastic Ono Band sitting in a record shop, got all excited to add it to their collection, and didn't realize until the needle hit the record that they'd unwittingly bought Yoko's Plastic Ono Band instead without even realizing it. Statistically speaking, this must have happened to somebody at least once, right? And let's be real here, every Yoko Ono album should have giant warning stickers plastered all over it. You don't want to pick one of those up by accident. And then there are the examples where the music demands something, noticeably less than a full-bodied immersion. Like, what's this? What am I supposed to get from this image by itself? Any mood or exploration onto the album's sound? No, I don't think so. Using a 2020 release as example, I can't say that my experience with Song for Our Daughter is particularly heightened by this isolated picture of Laura Marling. Also, the title is actually a pretty heavy signifier to the album's overarching themes. I really would have preferred it to have some prominence on the finalized cover. Or we can look at Rambling Man with acoustic guitar in hand, humdinger folk singer Mark Kozelek, and his work under the Sun Kill Moon moniker that is all about being a deliberate and oftentimes maddeningly of-the-moment creation in any facets, musical or otherwise. But issuing your brand new album with the blurry iPhone photo you took of your cat in your living room is pushing it for me. This sucks. Because there does exist a certain point where carefree turns the corner into careless. Some of these look like they were old promotional material that just got shrugged off into being the end product. And there are others where I just have to ask, was this image so important that printing your own band name on it would have just ruined the entire thing? I have my doubts. And I try to keep this next particular descriptor I'm about to use out of these discussions out of respect for the artist, but when these album covers are done poorly, there's only one word that comes to mind: lazy. This newer liberty for artists to take complete control over their cover art can backfire as such, and it can leave a bad impression. When the album art itself isn't all that substantial or remarkable on its own merits, you have to wonder why the crew that put these albums together for release would even bother going down this route. I mean, an album release going textless is a decision that somebody had to make. These choices don't happen by accident. Some musicians can toe the line, like real talk here. Is the album cover of Earl Sweatshirt's some rap song supremely half-cocked, or is it an acceptable visual conduit for the detached, in and out of focus, hazy rap excursions on this album? At least I bothered to ask, which is more than I could say about some of the others I've seen. While album covers of yore could be generic at times, they at least had these definitive guidelines to work within. Even independent releases of the past had some neat artwork while still feeling rootsy. It's not a one or the other de facto situation here. So to wrangle things in closer to a full circle and less of a shambolic wreck of a video that this is turning out to be, I wanted to talk up the importance of great and classic typeface that's out there. Let me say that I wanted to call this trend out both while it's still on the rise and in the middle of shifting gears, in due part because I'm actually getting a little worried, just a bit, that once textless album covers become the norm, album covers with typeface on them might just disappear. For good. Okay, yeah, maybe that's a bit hyperbolic, and I certainly don't want to speak in absolutes here, as we all know only the Sith do that, but all the same, I'm still more than a little concerned about its complete disappearance in the public eye. Because I really think there is a beauty worth admiring to well-executed typography. Albums can be so expressive with the fonts and color schemes they choose, and it can play a large part in how we shape our feelings towards a work of music, leaving a lasting impact on the listener. Which all sounds rather weighty for something basic as a font choice and a color wheel, but it's the truth. Like anything else, it's a tool that can be used poorly or to great effect, and I think it would be a shame for it to be missing from future albums. Or even less ideal, these new textless albums could even start to terribly date this current age of music. You know, whenever preferred listening formats do eventually change again in years to come. I'm not sitting here pounding my fist down and demanding we return to the old order of album cover creation. That's dumb. But I still like what style these older designs have. So I wanted to compare and contrast, and more importantly, just kind of observe what's going on right now. And I'm definitely not asking every album to be all text either. I'll save that for the greatest band in the world, Chumbawamba, to do. But like any fading method of art, one can't help but reminisce on what has made traditional cover art so affecting in the past. Because there are albums out there that are just as recognizable by the text alone as they are the larger image. Heck, you could be an album like Sunbather where the text is the artwork. Or it could be like how the typography for The Clash's magnum opus London Calling was designed with the clear intention, stating, "Rock music as you knew it is no more." The Clash's crowning achievement as a band not only fully exploded all the perceived fundamentals of punk in 1979, but it deconstructed the gargantuan ethos of what rock and roll music was built up of till that point in time. Sitting tall at a mean 65 minutes of adventurous genre rouletting across 2 full vinyl records, The Clash considerably expanded the scope of punk rock further than most ever thought possible and essentially rewrote the larger working theory of rock music overnight, earning the album a well-earned place into most casual histories of all-time great albums, with Rolling Stone in 2003 even declaring it the 8th greatest album of all time, the most recent album to be placed in the top 10 winner circle. But whatever the music itself doesn't get across, the album art sure did through its packaging, using its font selection to insinuate that this record is going to create a shattering of the old guard. If you don't recognize it, the font used on this legendary album cover is a direct rip from Elvis Presley's 1956 debut. And you aren't meant to be stumped as to why this flowery font of golden age rock music is being juxtaposed against a hectic black and white blur of Clash bassist Paul Simonon smashing his guitar in a bout of rage. Rock music is a self-imposed myth. The Replacements would pull essentially the same ploy in naming their third album Let It Be, No Holy Cows Can't Be Knocked Down a Peg. Phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust after all, so this is the new shape of punk to come. The magnitude of what would be lost without this font is nearly immeasurable. Same goes for the expressively cartoony Cooper Black font inviting you into the world of Pet Sounds, a beloved text that helped elevate what is otherwise a pretty terrible album cover in my opinion. I don't know how controversial that viewpoint is, but it's true. The Pet Sounds cover is awful, and I hate it. Like if you didn't know the gargantuan legacy that precedes this album, you would never ever in a million years look at this album cover and think it represents some of the best music ever made by man. Mike Love looks like he wants to smack that goat right in its fuzzy maw, but the text is forever iconic. Ahem. For all the racketeering and hullabaloo you could raise over this fascinating change in art, I think it's a welcomed alternative to the norm. I simply hope it doesn't phase out the more classic style in the process. It has led to some of my favorite record designs in recent memory, but a lot of it has left me cold just as well. So it's a trend in development, one worth taking note of and to watch as it grows in years to come. Did we get somewhere in this conversation? I think so. At least, I hope we did, or else Virgil Abloh's gonna have my legs broke. Ah! You know what I say? Maybe Bo Diddley had the right idea all those years ago. So, I'm going to pass this off to you. What do you think of this new style for album art? Is this even something you've paid all that much mind to before? What are your favorite albums with wordless covers, and vice versa? What album covers are made great because of their typeface? I'd really like to know. Thank you to everyone who stuck around during this channel's hiatus, and I do plan on keeping a more semi-regular upload schedule from here on out. The video you just saw was kind of a pick up the pieces and start over approach for me, cause I had kind of spent a lot of time on a couple big videos that I unfortunately had to shelve for the time being. I hope you'll see those videos one day, once I figure out how to make them work. One is going to be a video on Brian Wilson's first official debut album, nicknamed Pet Sounds 88, and the other is going to be a deep dive into Arizona music through the lens of 2 beloved 90s alt-rock songs. You might be able to guess what they are. So it was kind of from these scripts getting shelved and general life stuff getting in the way that sorta made this YouTube channel a tough one to jump back on. So if you stuck around, hey, thanks a bunch. And in the time since, I've also released my very first music video. It's for my song Perpetual Slip, and you can watch it by clicking the link in the description. I actually filmed the whole thing in the 110-degree heat of a real Arizonan summer in July. That alone makes it worth checking out. I think it turned out great. Follow Left of the Dial on your social media of choice, and please reach out. I want to talk with everybody everywhere. And last but not least, keep your eyes to the stars and your ear to the radio. Good night, everybody.